Berkshire Hathaway Renewables. How about DP Commercial Brokers, better known as the Dirt Peddlers? Embassy Suites. By the way, we had a great sponsorship and speaker VIP reception last night there. It was very cool. Kaiser Permanente. Kessler Dairyberry, who also happens to be the sponsor of our economist. Mojave Air and Spaceport. Condale Regional Medical Center. Rio Tinto Boron Operations. Southern California Gas Company. Walmart. And Western Pacific Roofing. And now, for our economic forecast, a presentation that's sponsored by our friends at Kessler Dairyberry. And backed by popular demand, Dr. Bill Watkins of California Lutheran Faculty and the Director of the Center for Economic Research and Forecasting, or CERF.
We are open for business. Statement here, and I tell you, for somebody from coastal California who values opportunity, who values the private sector, that's a wonderful thing to see. And I can tell you sort of the contrast. The city where I live, Ventura, you know, we had 3 families move in the last quarter of last year, so they declared a building moratorium so they could study how to manage growth. Everybody does it different, but I just love coming out here. I love the attitude that this community has about business, about jobs, about opportunity, because every place else I go, it's all about, quote, quality of life. And here you have jobs where people actually produce things. In coastal California, we have people who get paid a lot of money to walk old people. We get people who get a lot of money to walk dogs. And we have a doggy daycare where you can hook up on the internet and see your happy dog getting along with the other dogs. So, you know what it is. It's working. Okay, first thing you need to know is what economists, and I've been one for a long time, you think I could say it. What do we do good? And that's actually kind of a hard question to answer, so instead I'm going to talk about what we don't do well. And one of them is prices. So economists are all the time telling you something's wrong with the prices, not the price, it's a bubble, not bubble, it's too low. So we don't know. We've got these magnificent models, and I love them. I went into economics because of some of those models. But the fact is, we don't do a very good job on prices. So if an economist tells you something's priced wrong, take it with a grain of salt. If you get 3 economists, you'll have 4 different prices that it should be. None will be one you observe. That's not good. Can we get it going forward? Okay, we got a problem here. Okay, we got one good. Okay. The other thing we don't do is forecast recessions. There's been recent research on the topic, and it appears that nobody has ever accurately forecast a recession. Now, there are people who claim to have forecast a recession, and these are people who say, we have a recession coming, and they say that year after year after year, and essentially, the recession will come. We know that. And then they will say, see, I told you so. I myself do this in a slightly different respect. I lost $1,000 betting on Greece leaving the Eurozone a few years ago. They will leave the Eurozone. I will declare victory, even if it's 2025, okay? And so we don't forecast when. The time, you know a recession's coming. What you'd like to know is when, right? And so we don't do that very well. And bubbles. We don't do bubbles at all. And the world, I happen to think the stock market's in a bubble. Okay, but don't make an investment decision because of that. I thought it was in a bubble 3 years ago, and I have foregone a lot of gains keeping it in, CDs that pay 15 basis points or something stupid like that. If we know we're in a bubble, economists can't predict when the bubble will collapse, or if it even will. So, understand what we're doing. But think about a recession right now. You guys saw that GDP data for the last quarter was revised downward today, 2.6 to 2.2. And there's people worried about a recession, and there's some reasons. People talk about China's growth slowing. It's slow. They talk about oil prices falling. Both of these topics I'll talk a little more depth in a minute. Worried about Europe? Debt? That's a big issue. No doubt about it. Time. So one of the things that economists look at is how long do recoveries last? And as weak as this recovery has been, and it's been extraordinarily weak, it's been a long one. And so on average, we should have another recession right now. I don't think we're anywhere near that myself right now. And then, of course, the idea that there's bubbles, and when bubbles collapse, bad things happen. All right, let's talk about China. China's growth is slow, and people are all worried. China's growth is slow, but it's still over 7%. If the United States had a GDP growth rate of 7%, Obama would be planning his third term in office. So slow down a little bit. It's still going to be. The future is in the Asian markets as far as the economy. Europe is doing its best to kill itself. And it's a fading economy. It's going to be progressively less important. And whatever happens over there, except for the opportunity, the challenges of the geopolitical issues, that it's probably not going to make that much of a difference for our economy anymore. Developing countries, some people worry about developing countries. Most of those developing countries are not our customers. They're our suppliers. We buy stuff from them. So if they're having a slow economy, that doesn't hurt so bad at all. And then there's oil. So you hear all sorts of crazy things about oil. Some people will tell you that we're going to have a recession because the price of oil fell. They are wrong. They're just flat wrong. They are concerned about the fall off in investment in oil. And sure enough, the fall off in investment is significant, will be significant. But you have to put things in perspective. So, you guys remember Hurricane Katrina? Right? So after Hurricane Katrina, one of my friends, Rajiv, was on television saying we're going to have a recession because of Hurricane Katrina. And I actually called him up and said, I don't think so, Rajiv, you got it all wrong. The reason I was able to do that is I said, how big is the New Orleans economy? Well, we did some research. We found out it's about the same size as Ventura County's economy. And when you reflect on that, you go, you take Ventura County, push it into the ocean, and not too many people would care a lot. Not that so you need to put it in scale. So one of the things that has characterized this recovery has been very low investment across the board. One of the bright spots has been oil investment. Has been the bright spot. And but if you look at its impact on the economy, we calculate that the fall off in oil investment is at worst 0.5% of GDP. So if the GDP growth rate was going to be, say, 3, you take away that investment, it might fall to 2.5. But then there's the flip side. What's the good stuff? You guys just saw Walmart had a first good quarter in a long time. Why did it have a good quarter? Because its customers were spending at the store instead of the gas station. And the fact is, we are still a net importer of oil, and that means that our wealth has increased with the fall in price on net. And we calculate the benefit of lower oil prices at about 1% of GDP. And that was at $60. So one of the things that's been happening is that we believe that oil is a huge driver of the U.S. economy. And a guy named Jim Hamilton at UC San Diego has done some great work. And his work indicates that the Great Recession, precipitated by the Lehman Brothers collapse and all that, was actually more affected by oil than most people give it credit. If you recall the summer before the collapse in prices, gas prices got to be over $5, right? And that was the first time. You remember gas pumps used to not allow you to buy more than $50 at a time, and all of a sudden it became not enough to fill your gas tank, and they had to I was considering buying one of these little tiny little putt-putts that say gas. And when I'm doing that, it's time to get worried. But oil prices fell after the recession, and now they're falling again. We keep improving our forecast month after month because the amount of the oil fall keeps exceeding what we thought it was. Our 1% number is based on oil at $60 a barrel. It's now around $50 a barrel, so it's probably a little better than that. What that means is we think we're in the sweet spot of a recovery. And I tell you, after years of being the most negative guy on the American economy in America, I am very happy to be able to say that. I think because of the oil prices, we're going to see a pop. We're going to see, in general, the lower 3% U.S. growth, and actually see some job creation. One of the things that people don't recognize is that manufacturing has been making something of a comeback in the United States. And one of the reasons is because the huge resources that we have found in natural gas and oil over the past decade. There is a gas field that extends from New York State all the way down along the Appalachians there to Alabama. It's huge. Now New York has chosen, New York is not open for business. They've chosen not to tap into it at all, okay? Pennsylvania has. And as a result of that, all these discoveries, natural gas prices in the United States are below world market prices. And that's only possible because we can't export this stuff. It takes specialized facilities to export it, and communities along the beach don't want those specialized facilities. I can tell you, if you try to build a gas liquefaction center in Ventura County, you will spend millions and millions of years and never get the thing built, okay? So don't even think about doing it. So I think we're coming up there. That's lower prices bringing back manufacturing. So, the U.S. forecast. So what about it? One thing I think we have to talk about is why this recovery is so weak. It was always going to be weak. It was always going to be weak because of two things. One cause of this recession was home ownership rate was too high. When I first mentioned that, people thought I was totally un-American, okay? And the idea was everybody should own their home. You know, the fact is, not everybody has a job stable enough, or is geographically stable enough, or is mentally stable enough to own a home. And I always suggest that you probably know somebody who shouldn't own a home, and probably a brother-in-law. But so then, okay, not everybody should own their home. What's the right number? And in theory, economics doesn't help us at all. But observation is that every time it gets over 64% in the United States, bad things happen. And it climbed all the way to 69%. This was a result of policy. Politicians noticed that, hey, people who own homes are law-abiding people. They water the lawn, they take care of it, they do good things. If we give more people homes, maybe they'll all become nice people all of a sudden. It didn't work that way. Causality runs the other direction. The behavior of the people is why they own a home. And so it got to be where, you know, you didn't need a down payment to buy a home or anything else. I worry now that they're talking the same talk. And this is not one party either. Both parties have endorsed increased home ownership rate. And it began in 1994, 95, and it doesn't matter who's in charge. They want more people own homes. So that was a big problem. The other problem so that was going to drag things out a long time. The other thing was there's a huge loss of wealth. The value of so many things went down, and particularly small business people. Small business people, so 65% of Americans own their home. 95% of small business people own their home. Not only that, over 50% of small business people own more than 2 pieces of real estate. And that meant that these people, the people who create the jobs, who create the economic vigor in this country, didn't have the resources to do it. Their balance sheet debt didn't change, their assets went way down. So if their balance sheet was optimal before that, it was no longer optimal. It took a long time to get those balance sheets back up. And that's sort of the things that had to happen. But then government has done its best every opportunity to keep the recovery from happening. And one thing is, it's great. We have too many people own the homes, so we need to move a bunch of homes from your brother-in-law, who shouldn't own it, to an investor who should own it, and rent it back to your brother-in-law. Well, the government tried to keep that from happening, right? They did everything they could to keep that from happening. And so it slowed it down. Also, new regulation. So you got sort of terrible regulation started in the Bush administration with Sarbanes-Oxley. You remember the Enron crisis? And Congress said, we've got to do something to make sure this never happens again, in spite of the fact that everything they did was already against the law, and all of them went to jail except for one guy who died and really tipped off that people hated Enron, because we didn't get to throw him in jail. So they passed Sarbanes-Oxley. Sarbanes-Oxley is a drag on small businesses, small banks, and all that. And they continue that with regulation after regulation. And the regulation changes the playing field. Changes the playing field to the advantage of the big businesses. So, and small businesses and new businesses are where jobs created. That's where the frontier is. Big businesses don't create jobs. They consolidate. What do big businesses do? They buy each other and say they're going to cut 1,000 jobs here and there, right? So, so it's been slow. It's been terrible. And some of the other issues, so Sarbanes-Oxley was one I just mentioned there. Dodd-Frank is another one. We had a financial crisis. And so we wrote Dodd-Frank, and I tell you, this is crushing small banks. The compliance charge. So you think about a small bank versus a big bank. Bank of America has a compliance department that is huge. Now, I was a banker before I went back to grad school for 20 years. And I remember the first compliance officer I ever ran into. And we used to make fun of the poor woman because she was trying to tell us to do stuff we didn't want to do. Nowadays, there's some bankers here, I'm sure. The compliance officer has the most secure job in the bank. More secure than the president, more secure than any loan officer. Compliance officer is set for life because Washington is trying to create more work for that person. The problem with that is traditionally small business has received its funding from small banks. And Bank of America has programs for small business and stuff, but you know, I'm sorry if there's Bank of America people here. I do love you. But they just can't deal on the one-on-one basis that the small banks did. And I worked for large banks and I worked for small banks. And I know the difference in the flexibility that small banks have. So I think that's probably going to be a drag for a while. Minimum wage, I'm going to talk about in a minute. We're going to talk about extreme environmental regulation, Affordable Care Act, the strange things, and talk about that dichotomy of Main Street. So big business. So the stock market is at record levels. Big business has been the beneficiary of the recovery. At the same time, new business starts are at record lows. The number of corporations is falling and lower than it's been for a long time. And between the regulatory environment and the ability to be bailed out and the tie-ins with the people in Washington, big business has done fine, small business has done poorly. And that is why this has been a jobless recovery. I talked about PSST, Pattern Specialization and Training. And bear with me for just a minute on this. So, I mentioned brother-in-laws. My wife is family of only daughters, and they actually live in Apple Valley. I met her when I was stationed at George Air Force Base, and at Victor Valley College there. And they're all in the construction business, okay? And they do things around the house. They fix the floors, put up the walls, do stuff, right? Change them. I'm an economist. I was a banker. I don't know how to do any of that stuff. And my wife keeps thinking I should. So right now, we're thinking we want to sell the house, buy another one. We need a new floor upstairs, and she's thinking I'm going to do the floor. Not going to happen. And if I do it, I mean, there won't be a straight line. I mean, it's a joke in the family. I can't do anything. The thing is, I have specialized in something that's not very useful around the house. My brother-in-laws, they're handy. But they're also tired of helping me fix stuff around my house. So that we choose to specialize. And the nature of the specialization is changing. So I can remember the first time I rented a video. And this was in the early days of videos, right? They had these little tapes, and you rented this machine. It was bigger than this lectern here, the top part of it. And it weighed a ton, and you took it up to your TV set, and you watched your video. And then videos became an industry, and now they're gone, right? There is no, you download videos from Amazon or something like that. That's a career. Somebody specialized in that. They don't have to have that job anymore. And it used to be in my father's generation and my grandfather's generation, you could work for one company your entire life. Right now, they figure you're going to work for 7 or more, and the forecast is 13 different careers. I mean, the technology is changing so fast that it makes it difficult to anticipate a lifetime in any given industry. And so I specialize in what I do. If they come up with a robot that does it better than me, I'll be out of work, and I'll find something else to do. And maybe I'll be ready to retire right then. So at the same time, we think back to the Industrial Revolution. There were the Luddites, and the Luddites complained bitterly that the Industrial Revolution was going to put them out of work, right? And it didn't. Between then and now, we've created huge amounts of jobs and huge new industries. The loser in the Industrial Revolution was the horse. And we went from having a whole bunch to almost none. Today, though, we're really at risk of having some sort of inability to retrain. And one of the things that we now realize about the Great Depression was that it was also a time of very rapid change. If you think about it, America was becoming electricity was spreading throughout the nation. The farms were moving from mules to tractors. And it was a time of really rapid technological change. And because of that, somebody that was very good at running a mule and plowing the 40 acres didn't have anything to do anymore. And it took them a while to change. So that today's data, I'm going to show you some data a little bit later. The sector that has grown consistently throughout this recovery has been healthcare. The sector that has suffered the most has been the construction industry. Now, it's very difficult. I know this because my brother-in-law's. You're never going to turn a construction worker into somebody with a good bedside manner at the hospital. Just, first, you have to take away 20% of their vocabulary. The idea is that technological change can create sort of persistent unemployment, and we need to find a way to deal with it, to help people move through that. And we'll talk about that. Part of it's incentives. There's a research project recently done said 60% of the jobs that were created in 2014 were a result of shortening the unemployment period. Now, since then, those guys have taken the economic equivalent of a beating, and there's clearly some things wrong with their paper. But there's still evidence that a very high percentage is a job. And this corresponds to what we already knew. And that was, it doesn't matter how long the unemployment period is, a remarkably large number of people get a job the last week of eligibility. And so they just find a job, and it's over, you shorten it, and you got some job creation. The point is, incentives matter. You need to give people an incentive. The same thing, you need to give them an incentive to work. And what this is a chart. This is Pennsylvania. And we call them welfare cliffs. And so that first one is at $29,000. And that has to be a woman because one of the things they lose there is their child care. And if you make $1 more, you effectively face a tax rate that's hundreds of percent, maybe thousands, I haven't calculated that. And once you drop down, you'll make a little more, you make some more money, and then you drop down. It's going to take that woman $63,000 salary to be back at the same level of consumption. If you're making $29,000, the prospect of making $63,000 is just beyond imagination. It's not something you can see your way to do. So why would you try to do it? Why would you make that next bet? We're encouraging people not to work. We're giving some of the least advantaged people, Americans, this terrible negative incentive not to earn. We're giving them this huge tax rate. And the fact is that somebody should always be able to keep at least some part of the next dollar they earn instead of facing the loss of thousands of dollars of benefits. And that's a key thing. That's a huge incentive problem in our welfare system. And it's part of work makes people human. If you go to places, whether it's Appalachia, slums of Europe, Native American reservation, people who have everything they need, not great lifestyle, but everything minimum, they have all sorts of problems. Their relationships are short, often violent. Their health outcomes, even if health care is provided, is bad. The drug abuse, just all sorts of social pathologies. And we pay for that because we try to do everything we can to help those people. You're far better off letting those people have a job and subsidizing some other way where they always get some positive thing. So unemployment insurance, I think we should drop the first month and then tie it in with some retraining if they happen to be needing it or something like that. The reason you drop the first month is right now, you lose your job this week, you get a check next week for unemployment. You don't have any incentive to go find a job. We need to have somebody have an incentive to get back to work. You give them the incentive to be the people they can be. So in economics we have high marginal productivity workers. These are people you put into an organization and productivity goes up a lot. We have low marginal peak productivity people. You put them into an organization, production goes back up there. Theoretically, there are negative marginal productivity people. The only observations I've ever seen of them is people you call boss. You put them in there and productivity goes down. If a person loses their job to a robot, and a friend of mine, colleague of mine, sent me a video last night of the Tesla factory, and it's a fascinating video. They have, I think he said 160 some robots there, and they build it. If your job is taken away from by a robot, it doesn't mean you're a zero marginal productivity worker. All it means is the robot's cheaper than whatever the minimum wage is, right? Because the business has to pay you the minimum wage. And you know, in the Industrial Revolution, when the horse was phased out as a source of energy, we just put them out to pasture or make glue or whatever we did with them. We don't do that to people. And so we need to find a way to keep those people there. And I just mentioned, people that are totally subsidized need a job. Okay? They need a job to be what they can be. And so my proposal is you get rid of the minimum wage, but you backfill it with earned income tax credits like we have now already, and make it so that they always have an incentive to make an extra buck and always have a reason to go to work. It's much cheaper to backfill the salary with an earned income tax credit than it is to pay for the police and the social workers you need for somebody that's unemployed, long-term unemployment. So, okay, that's my dog, by the way. Beautiful dog. Stupid dog. Okay. We're looking at, okay, another thing economists don't do is forecast volatility. Okay. That is, our forecast is essentially about 3% GDP growth coming forward. That is the most optimistic forecast I've put out since, I guess, 2007. I don't know. Certainly since the Lehman Brothers collapse. But that doesn't mean that every quarter will be close to 3%. We can have a 2.2 quarter, like we had last quarter, followed up by 4.5 or something like that. We just don't have the technology to forecast volatility. But we look at around 3% for the next couple of years, which is a big improvement because it's been 2.5% for the past couple of years. And it means with that, we get to where we actually create jobs to bring back the labor force participation rate. Everybody's aware that the unemployment rate has gone down. Don't look at the unemployment rate. It has become a meaningless number. What's really happening is that the labor force participation rate, the number of people who participate in the economy, has been falling. It started a dramatic rise in the 1970s when women entered the labor force, and now it's falling. Part of that fall was expected. Baby boomers are getting older, some are going to retire, and it's a big hunk of population. And so we expected it. About a third is the estimates that are out there of the decline is because of that. The other 2/3 are economic. And people that may have specialized in construction that need another job. For instance, Ventura, if you're a construction worker, you might as well, they'll have a one-year moratorium on new residential permits because they're worried about that rapid growth rate. And so you move or you retrain, right? But you're not going to have a construction there. Job growth should pick up. That's all great. Those are the two things I interest. You know, somebody asked me, you don't show many charts anymore. People don't like looking at charts, and they'd rather have the stories. So I'm trying to tell you what we think is happening. So California. California is a very different place than it was where I grew up. When I was a young man, started my family, one of the things I considered when I got out of the Air Force was a job right here in Palmdale, working on building an airplane. You had a couple of factories here, and I thought about working in one of them. I don't know who it was, bought me a suit, said I'd be better in an office. They're probably right. So California used to have, the whole state had, we are open for business, right? Like you. But now, place after place after place I go, they don't want business. They just don't want it. And you know, I created a little bit of stir a few years ago when I said Ventura County would never see another 1,000 employee employer move to the county, and you know, they're never going to. Okay, one thing we need to recognize here is that California's gas price may not track the national. First, it's more expensive than the national because we have our own blend and because we have our own tax structure on it. But there's another problem. Because of our own blend, we have a very small number of refineries making it, and that explosion in Torrance the other day and fire will probably cause an increase in gas prices, just because there's not enough capacity to backfill it. So that'll happen. And that was is a huge facility. We were just trying to rough back the envelope estimates, and we think they were buying about $10 million of oil a day there. That's a lot of oil. So we expect gas prices to be a little higher. Ports, we apparently solved the little slowdown that was going on, but there's a longer term problem with California's ports. And that is, we refuse to invest in them. And you know, Los Angeles Long Beach port is entirely man-made. Okay? There is nothing pristine about it. We went out and put a bunch of things out there, but now because of environmental concerns, we won't deepen it. So we can't take the largest container ships in the world. And because of that, our competitors to the north, to the south, and because of the Panama Canal enlargement, and soon to be the south, and even the East Coast, are going to take increasing shares of our port activity there. Some economists think it's going to happen very, very quickly. I think it's going to be a slower transition because people tend to be motivated. They do the same thing over and over again until the costs become clear. So the ports are a bit of a problem for California. The single largest, last remaining engine of growth in California is venture capital system. And so if you didn't know it, venture capital, 50% of the world's, between 40 and 50% of the world's venture capital is invested in California. That's an amazing, amazing statistic. Given the world's population, our little piece of it, half of the venture capital. And another amazing thing and beautiful thing was it arose because of the market. You had the universities there, you had fantastic ideas being traded there, and I can tell you, the guy that can design a computer may not know how to build these things in quality, quantity, efficiently, probably doesn't know how to handle finance of the business, how to raise money, how to do all the other things, how to sell it, that businesses do. So what happened in the Silicon Valley just arose this whole infrastructure to finance small businesses, to bring products to the market, and create wealth, and so many of the advances we've seen over the last couple of decades. That is huge for us. At one time, as you well know, we were dominant in aerospace. That dominance has declined. I got in trouble once for saying California was post-industrial, or challenged, I guess. And you know, the fact is, the argument against me was California was never industrial. California was once the largest manufacturer in America. The largest manufacturing state in America that no longer is. We had steel mills. We built cars, airplanes, ships. You know, all the things we don't do much of anymore. You know, you get distracted. Clicker. So it's there. risk of losing it? You know, we have seen one dominant industry where we dominated the world disappear in California. Entertainments, we don't dominate like we do now. People are worried about that. And so I worry about the venture capital. And the thing to worry about there is that the nature of new products and new venture capital investment has changed a lot over the past several decades. It used to be you had Jobs in his garage building something physical. Now you have some guy in his pajamas building an app. It doesn't take near as much money to start that app, get it selling as it does to start the computer company. So the result is the standard venture capital deal has gone way down, and it's possible to spread around the country and not need the full infrastructure. Okay, next question is, of course, which California are we talking about? I had the chance to share a panel with Tim Draper once, and all he wanted to talk about was 6. I think 6 too many. But there are at least 2 Californias. And there's coastal California, and there is everywhere else. And I can tell you, the people in coastal California think of the people everywhere else about like they think of people from Alabama, which is not real high. Wasn't always this way. California once welcomed thousands, hundreds of thousands of migrants during the Depression and the Dust Bowl days, and these people were able to find jobs and the opportunity. Shirley Weber is a state assembly person. I think she's still a state assembly person from San Diego area. And she has a fantastic story. She's a black woman. Her father moved here during the Dust Bowl days. He had some ridiculous number of kids, 7 or 8 bunch. And he got a job in the steel mill, and he was able to buy a house. And he was able to raise those kids. And Shirley went to college, got a PhD at 26 at UCLA. You know, that's a story, and her, she'll tell you, that's a story that she can't see being repeated today. You can't do her family story in California anymore. And that's a big change. And in my mind, it's a change for the negative. Okay, talk about sort of the differences. So Disneyland. I may be writing a book. I don't know. I've got 5 chapters, but as my wife will tell you, I'm really tough on commitment. And so I'll be writing a book when I'm on chapter 12, okay? Disneyland. Walt Disney hired a firm to find land to build Disneyland in July 1953. 1953, Walt goes looking for some dirt. Summer of July 1954, he starts construction, okay? 1 year later, he starts construction after just looking for dirt. July 1955, 2 years almost to the day when he started looking for dirt, Disneyland opened. That huge project was done from concept to on the street in 2 years. 2 years. Today, it would take you more than 2 years to get the EIR done. Right? And that's a problem. I saw a talk by a guy from, I think it's San Antonio, whose job was to encourage new business to come. And somebody asked him, well, what do you do? He says, I answer phone from California companies. And part of the reason is because most of California is not open for business. I know a business that wanted to go to San Luis Obispo sometime about a decade ago. They made heads for Ford Motors, for racing heads. And this is way too physical for coastal California. And as a result, they were actually told by a city councilperson we didn't want them there. They didn't want them there. A job that will create a decent income for somebody without a college degree. And so that is part of the change. And in contrast to Disneyland, you guys ever go to Santa Barbara? Santa Barbara go sometimes? Yeah? Okay. As you're going into Santa Barbara on the left, there is a fence, big fence. There used to be a hotel there, the Miramar Hotel. It shut down in September of 2000 for an 18-month remodel. Right now, it's being stirred with a fence around it because of how hard it is to do something. In Santa Barbara, everybody has a veto on every project. I actually sent an email to the editor maybe a decade ago, the newspaper there. They all started the controversial project. I said, drop controversial. Everything in Santa Barbara is controversial. And so that's the challenge. And we've got another problem is dirt. Delay, uncertainty, regulation, and taxes. And that's that order for two reasons. I wanted to switch to T and D, but my wife would not allow me. But it's better they came out this way because these are the challenges to doing business in California. And I think they're actually in the right order, in order of importance. Time is money. Business people will tell you. And delay is expensive. Okay? It just costs a lot more to do it. Also, delay increases uncertainty. And nobody likes to invest their own cash into something that's uncertain. The less uncertainty you have, the better off you are. Regulatory environment in California is, it's not as bad as everywhere in the world, but it's bad. And then taxes are less. You don't have to have Texas's tax structure to have a profitable, prosperous, opportunity-ridden California. Research has shown that California workers are 2% more productive than the average American worker. This is after you adjust for education levels, capital, industry composition, no matter what you can think of. This is done by the San Francisco Fed. California workers are more productive. So you can have 2% higher taxes right off the bat and break even. But the other thing is, people will pay to live in California. They pay it in house prices, they pay it in salaries. We did a survey a few years back of sort of white-collar workers in Santa Barbara. And we asked them, how much more could they work if they were willing to work outside of California? And the minimum was $10,000. Everybody said they could make at least $10,000 if they went to Texas, but then they didn't want to go to Texas. And so the point is, people will work for less, they will pay more for housing. You don't need to have Texas tax structure. And like I said, I've lived in Texas a couple times, and I'd rather not go back. California is out to save the world through carbon regulation. Okay, a few things you need to think about first. One, California has one of the world's most efficient carbon economies there is. That is, that for every dollar of output we produce less carbon than anywhere else. As a result of that efficiency, it's very expensive to reduce it. Let's think about China. China's growing 7, 8, 10%. They are dumping crap into the air like you would not believe. They are extraordinarily inefficient. We would be far better off by taxing ourselves 50%, 75%, 100% of whatever our air quality regulations are doing and fixing the stuff in China. And it's not like it's a local pollutant. Carbon goes into the air, it spreads all around. You know, this idea of think globally, act locally is not right. You've got to go for the efficient way to reduce the pollutant. And the efficient way to reduce the pollutant in this case is go to China. So besides that, if you got rid of every carbon emitting source in California, the world's carbon concentration would be above that in 14 months. And it would be above that in 14 months because of the growth primarily in China and other developing countries. This is not, you can't do it. You get rid of it and you won't see it in the data. And it's incredibly expensive, so that's what we need to do. Talk about the drought real quickly. Drought was on everybody's lips last fall. It rained a couple times. And did it rain here in December a little bit? People stopped worrying about the drought. It's with us. It's going to cause some issues. So one of the problems is aquifer overdraft. And it looks like you guys are trying to start a water bank here like they have down in Kern County. Great idea. It works real well down there. The San Joaquin Valley, they're overdrawing the aquifers, and that is causing all sorts of problems. It's causing environmental problems, draining out land for the birds and the fish. And as opposed, I think we've got an obligation to take care of them in some way. And so, spending some of our water for the birds and the fish is perfectly good use for me. Overdrawing the aquifers is not, though. What happens is, once they're overdrawn, they can never be refilled. They collapse. And when they collapse, those land on top. And the problem is, the whole valley doesn't go down at one fell swoop or even slowly. You got a piece goes down here and a piece goes down here differently. And things like canals, bridges, roads break. Capital is destroyed. It's destroying capital. And because of that, it's the exact opposite of what we like to see. We've got two lower prices. So, till recently, I had a second home in Bishop, and I love to drive up there. But it always drives me crazy to see those guys watering their alfalfa. And they're watering it because it's free to them. They have a right to all the water they can pump out underneath them. And in fact, they have an incentive to pump it out fast as they can because the landowner next door is Los Angeles and they're pumping it too. And so there's this race to the bottom. They're pumping it out. And the farmer can't sell it. He can turn it into alfalfa and sell it. Or in Ventura County, we make strawberries. Very water-dependent crop. And we can export strawberries, but the farmer who owns that land can't export the water. And so the result of that, and all the price problems, because the price is wrong, it gets used inefficiently. And something that we've got to restructure there. The inability to resell is part of that, and then the worst part is the political allocation. Okay. You know, it's a very inefficient way to allocate it. There is no reason to believe that a political allocation is anywhere near as efficient as a market allocation. We need to start letting that happen. As it is, the drought's costing us. It's probably going to decimate agriculture in California. Okay, California's forecast. There's the dumb document. The Bay Area. So there is no California. Tim Draper's right. There is no single California. The Bay Area is booming. It didn't notice this recession was even there. Home prices are outrageous up there. It's all good. In a way, it's all good. You know, the number of minorities who live in China San Francisco. Well, the contrast is minorities exclusive of Chinese. There's plenty of Chinese in San Francisco, but Latinos and blacks, their population has gone way down because they've been priced out of housing. So there's something. Elite coastal. This is where I live. You know, in a way, it's a very strange economy. It doesn't grow much, but there is an abundance of wealth. And that's the way they like it. The people with the money like it that way. And they don't care if they've got to go to Texas to visit the grandkids. It's just for a week. So, everywhere else except Los Angeles County is essentially depressed. A statistic came out a few years ago, not 2 years ago I guess it was now. San Bernardino had the second highest poverty rate in the United States for cities over 200,000. That's only exceeded by Detroit. And I can tell you that when I got married in 1972, if you'd have told me that was going to be the case, I would have said, you just got it all wrong. You just did wrong. And so something has happened. California still has the beautiful beaches, the beautiful weather, all the things that make it such a wonderful place to live. And we're basically giving it away. And so I encourage people, I tell people lots of times, go up Highway 33. And if you don't know where Highway 33 is, it starts in Ventura, right there at the ocean, and it goes up through Ojai, and it crosses Highway 5 a dozen times or so. And you will see cities that you would not believe were California or America. I mean, there's poverty there. Communities up there with well into the double digits of unemployment, even in good times. Extreme poverty right here in California. Fresno is also in the top 10%, 10 cities with poverty rates. So that's what's happening there. We're going to get to Los Angeles here in a minute. Los Angeles is better. Talk about real estate real quick. I got a jam? Okay, real estate. Okay, home ownership rate I've talked about. It's already gone down. Middle market. So one of the things we're distinguishing now is between lower markets and top-end markets. Lower markets are where they are because all the people had to move out, and then the Goldman Sachs, BlackRock's moved in and solidified the market. They were bidding on, one of those companies was bidding on 200 homes a day in Florida. They bid the price up to where it's probably stable. What's going to take it to drive those markets up again? We need births, marriages, and household formation. Our young people are not doing any of the three. They're going through school and moving home again and playing computer games or doing something, but they're not doing household formation, babies, or marriages, okay? And until that happens, we won't see sustained recovery on those markets. Luxury markets, though, are completely different. The untold story of the world's economy over the last several decades is that world inequality has been shrinking as the poorest people in the world are getting better off all the time. As that happens, there are more and more rich people scattered all over the world. And I'm telling you, if you're living in a desert someplace and somebody says you can afford a house in Santa Barbara, you might move. Especially if you don't care about where your money's come from, you've already got it. And so the luxury markets are doing very well because they are not dependent on the local economy. They're dependent really on wealth and on their economy. So they're doing fine. Peak office. So you guys are aware now 3D printing has come a long ways, right? I can remember when I did my first fax. It was at a thrifty, I think, and it cost a dime. And then you could get one at your bank for free if you had enough deposits with them. And now you've got a machine that does faxes and copies and all this stuff right there. You will someday have a 3D printer. So not too long ago, a tool was emailed to the space shuttle. What that means is they sent them a program and they printed the tool on a 3D printer on the space shuttle. Someday you'll be making all this stuff yourself. You will just go to Amazon, Prime will cost you $150 by then, and you will download the plan and you will print up your tool. And the guy who made it, the warehouse and delivery, all those guys are out of a job.
My name is Andrea Morris, Operations Manager for Incotech Corp here in Lancaster, California. I relocated from the Woodland Hills area up to Lancaster, and the founder, Robert Riley, just saw something great in me, he said, and I started as the receptionist for their company back in September 2005. And I went to school for 3 years. I was their health and safety director, and from there, I went back to school. UCLA Extension, took a lot of classes there, and became the operations manager. They really believe from promoting within. That's what's most exciting about working at the company. Before they go to look outside to bring new people in, they start in the community. They want to raise the community up. They want to educate the community, and they will train you. They'll train you, they'll send you to school. I've attended UCLA. They pay for me to do that. They want to employ the community, and that's what's most exciting for me working for a company such as incotech. We currently have 236 employees in Mojave, California. Lancaster is our expansion. We're getting ready for the bill rates for Boeing that will be coming out shortly here around 2015, 2016. It takes a while to get your certifications for AS9100, NADCAP, and then your customers have to approve your facility. So we have broken ground in 2013, and we'll be up and operational here in Lancaster around April 2015. Incotech has lowered their carbon footprint by developing the world's first low VOC coating, our Incotech AGNC. Incotech is actually an acronym for Innovative Coatings Technology Corporation, and that's exactly what we do. What I love about working here is that we've gone out into the community. We've brought people in who had basic skills, and we've trained them to do these really intricate jobs, from working on the spray line to working in our pre-treat, working in our blast, working in our compounding area where we developed our coatings. It's pretty exciting. Our founder, Robert Riley, who started the company here in 1992, had this awesome vision for this company. He wanted to be the world's greatest coating facility, and that's what we've evolved into. He's also a vet, and he started this program for veterans in the Antelope Valley who don't have transportation to get to and from their doctor's appointments and or any business appointments that they may have at the VA building in Van Nuys. So it's pretty exciting to work for a company who gives back so much to the community. I don't just work in Lancaster, I also have a wonderful life in Lancaster. They have theaters, they have bowling centers, they have the Foxfield Air Show. That's very exciting to see. There's a lot of different things that just make you really want to stay in the city of Lancaster. You can work here, you can have a career here, you can raise your family here. I love the fact that the city of Lancaster is so safe. I'm really a big fan of our mayor, our ex-parents. They are creating jobs so that you don't have to take that long commute down to the San Fernando Valley area or down to LA. You can actually stay here, have a career, raise your family in such a wonderful community that we have.
Yes, Wally Amos became an international personality renowned not only for his cookies, but for his positive, ebullient, and outgoing persona. You're going to witness that in a few minutes. He's the author of 8 books, including The Famous Amos Story, The Face That Launched 1,000 Ships, Man with No Name, Turning Lemons into Lemonade, The Power in You, 10 Secret Ingredients for Inner Strength, and his latest, The Watermelon Credo, the book, and he's going to be selling these books after his presentation. A longtime advocate of literacy, he served as the national spokesperson for Literacy Volunteers of America from 1979 to 2002. And in 2005, he and his wife, Christine Harris Amos, founded the Read It Loud Foundation, a publicly supported 501c3 organization to promote reading aloud to children. And Wally arrived a day early to do just that and visited Miller Elementary, Cottonwood, and Dos Caminos Elementary Schools yesterday and read to the children. So Henry Awards has received the President's Award for Entrepreneurial Excellence, the Horatio Alger Award, and the National Literacy Honors Award. But Amos is more than just cookies. In 1996, he co-founded with Lou Avignon Uncle Wally's Muffin Company, a leading branded muffin company. Help me welcome Mr. Wally Amos.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I am happy to be here. I used to say that all the time. I don't give talks a lot anymore. I guess you can tell. But when I did this more frequently, I'd always say, well, I'm happy to be here. And the reality is, I'm happy to be anywhere. I am so happy to be alive. But in the Antelope Valley, I have never been in the Antelope Valley before. I think I've been through here. I lived in Los Angeles for a very long time, and I think that I've been through here, but I'm not sure. But at my age, my memory begins to slip. So I'm not sure about a lot of things, but I am happy to be here. Thank you all very much for having me here as a speaker. And I don't, as I said, I don't write talks. What comes up comes out, and for me, it's just a matter of instant recall. And I always think that whatever I'm supposed to say, I'm going to say. And anything that I'm not supposed to say, obviously, will not get said. So you would have to figure out what that was supposed to be, because I'm not going to say it. I feel really silly this morning. But I feel silly most mornings. But this is an interesting time for me. March 10th will be 40 years ago that I opened Famous Amos Cookies at 7181 Sunset Boulevard. I had never done anything like that before. I had been in show business for 14 years, working with entertainers. I was the first agent to book Simon and Garfunkel and Marvin Gaye and the Supremes, and that whole show business time was a wonderful, wonderful time in my life. I learned a lot. Got beat up a lot, not physically, but mentally. But it was a great, great experience. Little did I know, I was being groomed, that I was being prepared to sell cookies, because I didn't know anything about the cookie business, but I knew how to make a good tasting chocolate chip cookie. And I had done that for 5 years. I love chocolate chip cookies. Now, I make a couple of the flavors also, and I love them too. I don't want those two flavors to feel neglected. But maintain that there is good in every experience. And if it were not for the fact that my mother and father divorced, I would not be standing here this morning. Because moving to New York with Aunt Della, she lives at 567 West 161st Street. Moving to New York to live with Aunt Della changed my life. Because it was Aunt Della that made chocolate chip cookies for me. My mother was a disciplinarian. I mean, actually, she would make me lower my pants because she wanted to get to the flesh. She did. When I got older, and I would often tell her, Mom, you know, if you were raising me today, I could have you arrested for child abuse. But anyway, it was Aunt Della that made chocolate chip cookies for me. And I'd never had chocolate chip cookies before. My mother was a great cook. She made pies and cakes and stuff like that. But she never, ever once made cookies. And Della made these chocolate chip cookies. They tasted so good. So good. And when it would run out, I'd make a sad face. And I was her favorite. And she would make a fresh batch just for her favorite nephew. And I just love them. If any of you want my recipe, it's the Double House chocolate chip cookie recipe. But I can tell you right now, it will not taste the way I make them. Because mine don't taste the way you make them. We're all different. Life is energy. Life is spirit. And that's what makes the difference. Nobody in this room, nobody in the world loves chocolate chip cookies the way Amos does. They really don't. I love chocolate chip cookies. I mean, more than life itself. Woo! They are so good. Especially mine, of course. So, anyway, I went home, got the ingredients, and there everything was, and I started making chocolate chip cookies. I would take them to meetings because it was a way, they were my calling card. And I would show up at a meeting, and before we started talking about my client, any business, I'd break open some chocolate chip cookies. It would start the meeting off on a much sweeter note, every single time. It got to a point also where people would see me, and before they would say hello, they would say, "Hey man, where are my cookies?" And I became known in Hollywood for making these cookies. And that went on for a long time, about 5 years or so. Finally, one evening, I was having dinner with a lady named B.J. Gilmore. B.J. was Quincy Jones' secretary. I had offices at the time at A&M Records. And so my office was adjacent to Quincy's office. And B.J. and I were good friends. No romance or anything, but she was a neat lady. And we had dinner one evening. This was October 1974, the latter part of October. And all of a sudden, we were just having a conversation, and B.J. said, "You know, Wally, you and I ought to go in business together selling chocolate chip cookies." That thought had never, ever crossed my mind. I was having so much fun giving them away because it was my calling card. And I loved giving them away, and it's 40 years later, and I still love giving them away. You know, because when I give you a cookie, I literally give you a part of me. And there's something magical about that. So anyway, DJ made that statement, and I decided then that I would open a store. Now, I know that there's a God, because there's so much in my life that has confirmed that. But I had never, ever thought about selling cookies. But at that moment, when PJ said, Wally, we ought to go into business selling cookies. And then she said, I've got a friend that I can get to put up the money. That was a trap, because she never found her friend. But I walked into the office the next morning, and I had been thinking about this thing throughout the night. And I knew that if it were food, the health department would have something to do with it. I mean, you know, life is really just common sense. And there's some technicalities along the way, you know. If you live up in this area and you work with all these rockets and stuff, there are a lot of technicalities. But on a basic level, it's just common sense. And anybody that gives it any thought can really figure it out. So I knew that if it were food, the health department would have a part in it. So I walked into the office the next morning, and the very first thing that I said to PJ, call the health department and find out what are the requirements for opening a store selling chocolate chip cookies. That taught me so much. It taught me, first of all, that the most important step in any undertaking is the first step. Because you can't take the second, third, or any step subsequent to that unless you take the first step. And you don't know what the first step is. You know, you don't know what you're supposed to do. There's no blueprint that's saying, this is the way you're going to go, this is what you're going to do. But it comes to you in small increments usually. And I did that. And one thing led to another. And 5 months later, I was selling cookies at 7181 Sunset Boulevard. I had to push my opening back about a week or so because Jerry Moss, who is the M in A&M Records, Herb Alpert is the A, and I had offices, as I mentioned, and they were going to invest some money in it, $5,000 a piece. I figured I needed $25,000 to start it. And they'd been on holiday, and I thought I'd open March the 3rd, and I'm like coming down to the end of February, and I need the money, and finally, I reached Jerry on the phone, and I'm like in the building, that little A-frame building, Sunset Boulevard, in that building, remodeling, getting it together and stuff, and I'd gotten a few dollars, and that was gone. I needed money, and so I finally reached Jerry, and I said, hey Jerry, this is Wally, and like a pause. You know that pause? It's kind of like, there ain't gonna be no money, you know? And so he said, Wally, you know, man, you know, I'm not going to be able to do it, man. I'm overextended. Now, he was putting up $5,000. The man had more money than God at that point. $5,000 did not overextend him. I knew that. But I knew also that he had changed his mind. And he had every privilege to change his mind. So I didn't cry, I didn't curse him out. I said, hey man, that's cool. You know, and I hung up the phone, and I walked into my little cubicle of an office, and I took out my phone book, and I just started going through it, looking for a name, literally. I mean, this was my mindset, folks, looking for a name that had $10,000 next to it. Because the problem was obvious. I need $10,000, I need it now. The solution is find $10,000. I've learned not to cry, not to complain, not to criticize, not to condemn people. You know, you identify the problem and then you fix it. That's the only way you're going to get through it. And I did that. In 5 months, I was opening. I had a huge grand opening, and I was off and running. Along the way, I forgot that I didn't know what I was doing. I'm a good promoter, and I've become a better promoter through the years. But I might conceivably be the world's worst businessman. And because it was a trap, Famous Amos was an absolute trap for me, because I started becoming famous. And I knew that fame was a trap. I knew that fame was not important because I had represented famous people and been around them for 14 years. So I knew that was an empty existence. But yet, on a subconscious level, I fell for it. And I started thinking that I was important. And that I've learned from all of this is that it's what's inside that matters. You know, I literally, I've been drugged. I've been drugged through this experience, but I've never given up. I still want to have fun. I still want to make a great cookie, and I still believe that I'm going to do that. And it is that belief, it is that desire to redeem myself to me, not to you, but to me, because I really screwed up. and so I know I'm better than I've demonstrated in the past, and I know that I can do it again, and this time do it right. It can be profitable. It will be profitable. I got a great partner now. I got a guy now who really knows how to manage money in the same product. I was calling it Amos at one time. I had the cookie guy, I had the cookie man, and something happened with all those names. I couldn't use them, but I've always kept the cookie. So I got that same cookie, and now it seems that the cookie kahuna is it. It's catching on. It is happening, and I feel good about all of that. And throughout all of this, I have grown so much. So much. And for me, it's been a spiritual journey. Because for me, that's where life is. That's the foundation. It's that spiritual part of it that keeps you going. But too many great things happen that I could never create. So clearly, I'm not in charge. Thank God I am not in charge. And I realize that so conclusively now. But there were times when I thought that I was in charge. And I don't want to be in charge. When I follow my guidance, when I follow my spiritual guidance, I mean, it just leads me to everything I need. But if you want to succeed, you've got to keep going. I don't care how difficult it is. I don't care how bad it looks. Forget what it looks like. Just know that there's always an answer. So I write an article for the Postal Code Connection. I've been writing that article for 20 years. They never told me what to say. They never suggested any topics. They never refused an article in 20 years that I've submitted. January was my first, every quarter now I write. January was my article for the beginning of the year. And it was entitled, Please Don't Quit. I got such a great response from this article. So there are a lot of people going through some challenging times, and they don't know what to do. I have been one of them, but you can't quit. The only way you lose is if you quit. I don't care what you're doing, there is always a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a train coming towards you. But you cannot give up. For sure you will lose if you give up.